Overwatch. Releasing back in 2016, Overwatch has always been able to keep up in the ranks for being well known and very popular as a whole. However, I'm here to debate the case that Overwatch isn't quite as good as it seems, and I'm here to point out some of the great things about Overwatch and the flaws that come with it, and whether it's worth playing or not. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Overwatch is a game that is very objective based. It offers you a couple modes where you, alongside other teammates, work toward a certain goal, whether that'll be moving a payload to its destination, defending a target, attacking a target, or what have you. There are also mini games along the way to play created by the community themselves, so you can play that if you're not really into this whole objective stuff. The game utilizes three types of heroes: supports, damages, and tanks. Tanks are meant to absorb damage like a sponge and play defensively. The damage or attackers, or DPS, depending on which term you go by, are supposed to push up on the enemy team and weaken their defenses. And the supports are supposed to heal, and they can be used as secondary fire for the attacks if they need to play offensively. Every hero in the game is designed differently. Each hero has its own unique abilities and attacks that is used against the enemy team or in favor of your own team, depending on which role you select. As a result, this game offers multiple playstyles for other players to choose from and pick a hero that works best for them. I feel as if Overwatch is reminiscent of Black Ops 3 in a sense. Black Ops 3 had specialists, of which 2 had their own unique abilities and such. However, it was done differently in Overwatch. The unique abilities of every hero was the forefront in Overwatch. It's what defined the game. With Black Ops 3, on the other hand, Specialist was just secondary. It wasn't the forefront of the game. With Overwatch's system of being a very team-based game, along with individual heroes having their own individual abilities, by concept, it sounds like it would work very well. The rules are meant to influence each other's playstyles, so everybody's meant to assist their teammates in some way, shape, or form. Whether the supporters are healing the attackers, the tanks are taking the damage for the attackers, and the attackers are slowly weakening the other team, with the tanks potentially finishing them off. That's kind of the premise of Overwatch. That's at least how the gameplay works. But notice how I put emphasis on concept? Yeah, the game itself, gameplay-wise, isn't so sound, and I'm about to explain why. Let's move on to the next chapter of this video, though. I'm not gonna lie to you, Overwatch has a very big issue with its competitive mode, and I'm not really gonna touch upon quick play or arcade mode too much because those serve as casual game modes and they do as such. They don't really do anything wrong. You know, if you do get poor teammates in there, it's not really much of a surprise. It's casual, that makes sense. But the driving force of a lot of games nowadays is its competitive side of things, and Overwatch's, let's be honest, downright sucks. It might be like a sledgehammer to your balls to hear something like that, for me to say something so harsh without much regret. But let's be honest with ourselves, competitive mode is one of the most frustrating experiences I think I've ever witnessed in a video game. I'm getting faulted for things my teammates aren't able to do. And don't even give me that, well, just don't enter as a solo player, you know, queue up with some people, make friends, talk to people. I'm not going to completely invalidate that, but I should not have to rely on something that's purely optional for even the smallest bit of success. You know, this game is known for having a very toxic fan base, but when you really look in depth as to why, it makes sense. Teammates want their teammates to perform the absolute best that they can so that one teammate alone can move up the ranks. A lot of us are getting held back because sometimes our teammates are not carrying their weight or they're throwing matches intentionally. And as a result, we get punished for that. And there's no reduction for it. There's no sympathy in the point system. The game's skill rating system is very robotic-like. There's no human to it. It counts your progress as either winning or losing. There's no in-between, there's no consideration, no sympathy for any losses. You could be pulling your weight, about to enter gold, your teammates could not be pulling their weight, and you're gonna get punished just as hard for that. I understand it's a team-oriented game, so you should progress as a team. I get that, but there needs to be more factors put in this competitive mode. One person should not be able to pull down an entire team. That makes no sense. And what is the worst issue about this is that it doesn't even just apply to newcomers. It doesn't even just apply to more new players, it applies to everybody. Noobs, amateurs, intermediate players, the hardcore players, the veteran players. Every single skill type in this game is affected by this issue. And like I said, I understand it's a team-based game, but it could be the difference of one person dragging everybody down to hell. And my god, is it so frustrating. There will be so many times when I'm about to move up a rank in tank or in attackers or healers, and then one person screws up. One person screws up, and that costs the entire match. And I don't get to move up the rank. Can there not be any alternatives here? I mean, role queue kind of helps that issue a little bit, because there's more balance in the choices that your teammates will pick, because they're forced to have 2 of every role. There's no question as to why this game is so notorious for being toxic. It makes sense when you look at it more in-depthly. People are frustrated. People are tired of being deranked for things that may not be entirely their fault. People are trying to move up on their own, and the way this game system works with competitive is preventing them from doing so, because everybody's faulted for 1 or 2 things that other people could have done. Now, I get that some people are going to have bad matches, sure, but everybody's suffering way too much for small mistakes. I get a loss is a loss and whatnot, but at least take note of everybody's individual performance and see how it applies to that loss. You could look at somebody and say, did they do their best in this match? Were they one of the reasons why they lost, or did they possibly delay their loss? Did they actually assist in the game? There is different factors that Overwatch could be looking at in these issues, but they refuse. So, I'm saying it right now, their skill rating system can suck a big one. While the competitive mode makes me want to shove my fist through my TV screen, there are good things to be said about Overwatch. As I mentioned earlier in the video, there are other modes to play. Quick play and arcade mode aren't as frustrating, and the community-made modes are actually really fun. There's games like Genji Ball, there's also Gun Game, there's Build Your Own Hero, or Upgrade, whatever one you prefer to refer to it as. There's some really fun stuff that the community has made, and it's very good for alleviating some of that frustration of competitive mode is pissing you the hell off like it does me on a near daily basis. I am thankful for the fact that Overwatch's competitive mode isn't necessarily the biggest driving force in the world. I think Rocket League's competitive mode, by example, makes up a bigger chunk of their fan base, whereas with Overwatch, the players are a little bit more divided and not as much of the community is contributed to competitive, so the game is still playable and a lot of other modes are still lots of fun to be had. I'm not saying to avoid competitive mode, but I will warn you, prepare for the frustration of it, man. Another good thing to be said about Overwatch is it's actually receiving a lot of support by the developers, whereas before the announcement of Overwatch 2, they apparently didn't. Now, I'm a newer Overwatch player. I've only had Overwatch for a bit over a year, and I don't know how long ago Overwatch 2 was announced. However, I didn't really start playing it that often until a couple months ago, when my friends wanted to play with me more, so that's when I started getting into Overwatch more and more. But I've been seeing a lot more frequent support for the game, which is pretty nice. I'm wondering why this wasn't the case earlier. Again, I can't speak on behalf of those who've actually experienced it, whereas I have not. However, from what I've been hearing, it's kind of a interesting and weird situation, I suppose. How does that even make sense? Regardless, the game is getting support a lot now, which is better late than never, I suppose. So at the end of the day, it's for the better, I guess. You all probably got the impression that I was going to give Overwatch a terrible rating at the end of the video, as I will be giving this a score out of 10. However, I can't give it a bad score, because as I mentioned, arcade mode, quick play, and the community-made games, they're all fun. In fact, competitive mode is the only shortcoming of this game I would really say there is. But at the end of the day, it's just a piece. However, that piece is quite big, so it will reflect a decent bit in Overwatch's score. Don't get me wrong. Think of Overwatch as doing well with the actual assignments and the classwork. However, when the exam came around, the only thing I can remember is Overwatch taking off their pants and having a shit all over the paper. It's important to remember that by concept, Overwatch is a phenomenal game, and gameplay for the most part is pretty sound. It's borderline good, I would say. If you had to boil down Overwatch's gameplay to an average, I'd say it was a good game by execution and a phenomenal game by concept. So from here, all I can really do is give Overwatch a rating out of 10, and I also like to chart it on a tier list in a way. So there will be F, D, C, B, A, S, and S+. You usually want to be A or better, but B still okay. And on that note, I think Overwatch just made an A overall, and I can give Overwatch a final score of 8.0 out of 10. A pretty solid game overall, but does have noticeable flaws if you look into them deeply enough.